A little boy vanished from his front yard one day, leaving his family shattered and desperate. 8 years later, his voice is found on an old tape recorder, unlocking a mystery no one could have imagined. This is a story of loss, hope, and a family's unbreakable love. Before we begin, please tell me where you're watching from by dropping a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. It was the kind of spring afternoon that made the heart ache with quiet happiness. The wind was gentle, just enough to carry the scent of fresh-cut grass across the sleepy street, and the trees whispered softly as if they too were content in the warmth of the sun. In the small town of Cedar Falls, Wisconsin, where folks knew each other's middle names and porch swings creaked in rhythm with time, the Grant household sat like any other. Humble, neat, with a white fence barely taller than a toddler's head. That toddler was Noah Grant, barely 3 years old, with golden curls that seemed lit from within and a giggle that traveled farther than any bird's song. He loved the front yard swing. It was a gift from his grandfather, a simple wooden seat with red ropes tied to the sturdy maple tree that shaded the lawn. It squeaked when it moved, but Noah didn't mind. He could spend hours there, legs too short to push off, waiting for his mama to give him the tiniest nudge every now and then. That day, his mother, Emily, was only steps away, just inside the screen door. She had been sitting on the porch steps, watching him sway, humming something without words, the way mothers do when peace fills their chests. The phone rang. She hesitated. It had rung twice already that morning, telemarketers both times. But something in her gut nudged her forward. She stood, turned her head toward the house, and called out gently, "Just 1 minute, honey. Don't go nowhere." Noah responded with a giggle and a wobbly "okay" before kicking his legs, trying to make the swing go higher. Emily stepped inside, the door slamming behind her with that loose screen clatter that only old doors make. The phone was in the kitchen, and she didn't even look at the caller ID before picking it up. "Hello," she said. It was her sister, Claire, calling about a birthday dinner. They talked for less than 2 minutes, just long enough for the wind outside to pick up and then fall still. When Emily hung up and stepped back outside, the world had changed. The swing was empty. She blinked. At first, she thought maybe Noah had climbed off and gone to the side yard. She called out, "Noah," but there was no answer. Her heart beat a little faster. She walked around the tree, looked behind the flower beds. "Noah," she called again, louder now. The silence felt too thick, the way a house feels after a clock stops ticking. She checked the porch. She ran to the backyard. She called again, her voice sharper, cracking, "Noah." Her feet hit the ground hard as she sprinted across the lawn, her voice tearing through the stillness. In less than 60 seconds, that calm spring day unraveled into a mother's worst nightmare. Within an hour, the police were on the scene. Neighbors gathered in loose knots, trying to help, trying to understand. No one had seen anything. No cars, no strangers, no sound of a child crying or calling. The swing just swayed slightly in the breeze, as if Noah's tiny body had only moments ago left it. Officers swept the house, the yard, the street. Bloodhounds were brought in. Helicopters thumped overhead by evening. The sun fell too fast that day, as if even it didn't want to bear witness to what had happened. Emily clutched one of Noah's small blue sneakers, the one he always took off and left by the porch steps. Her husband, Mark, returned from work in a frenzy, his face pale, his voice hoarse as he begged the officers to check again, to keep looking, to not stop. Night fell, and still, no trace, no clue, not even a footprint where there should have been one. No scream had pierced the air, no sign of struggle. It was as if the earth had swallowed the boy whole. The swing didn't squeak anymore. It hung limp, motionless, the ropes gently twisting like they were hiding a secret. By the third day, news crews arrived, broadcasting from the front lawn. "Toddler vanishes from front yard in broad daylight," the headlines said. But none of them could capture the ache in Emily's chest, the sound her voice made when she called Noah's name into the wind and got nothing back but silence. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She stood outside each night, long after the police had gone, whispering his name into the dark, praying to a God she hadn't spoken to since childhood. She whispered into his room, too, hoping maybe, somehow, He'd be there in the morning like it was all just a dream. But morning never brought him back. The swing, once a symbol of joy, became a monument to loss. Mothers in town clutched their children tighter. People started locking their front doors in the daytime. And Emily, who once knew every chirping bird on her street by sound, now noticed only the silence, and the way the light never quite reached the same corners of her heart again. The days after Noah's disappearance fell like dominoes tipped by grief, each one crashing into the next with the same dull ache, the same unbearable emptiness. At first, Cedar Falls rallied. Volunteers combed the surrounding woods, fields, culverts, and creek beds, their hands trembling as they pushed back brush or lifted bits of debris, hoping and fearing what they might find. The sheriff's department issued Amber Alerts, canvassed nearby towns, and pulled traffic cam footage from every intersection within a 10-mile radius. Nothing. No one had seen anything. No strange cars. No unfamiliar faces. Not a single scream, cry, or hint of struggle. It was as though the wind had taken him. The theory chilled everyone to the bone. A child, in plain view, gone in less than 2 minutes. Emily and Mark were questioned separately and together, though gently at first. Law enforcement knew how trauma clouded memory, how the mind, desperate for meaning, often bent the truth without malice. But when the leads dried up and the trail grew cold, eyes began to narrow. The FBI was brought in by the end of the week. They searched the home top to bottom twice, digging into family history, finances, friends, routines. There were no red flags, no signs of abuse, no debts, no custody disputes, no hidden anger. Emily and Mark were ordinary people living an ordinary life. And yet, their child was gone. Reporters became vultures. They circled the neighborhood in vans, poked cameras through hedges, and shouted questions from the sidewalk. Did you leave him alone? Were there any marital issues? Do you believe he's still alive? Emily stopped answering the door. She couldn't look at her reflection anymore without feeling like she'd failed in some cosmic, unforgivable way. The sound of a swing creaking in her dreams began waking her at night. Except in her dreams, Noah was still on it, smiling, reaching toward her, then vanishing just before she could grab him. Mark tried to stay strong. He went back to work after 2 weeks, only to break down in the middle of a construction site when he saw a little boy holding his father's hand. Neither of them were the same. They couldn't be. Time had split into 2 timelines, before and after Noah disappeared. The town held candlelight vigils. Local churches dedicated Sundays to prayers and pleas. People dropped off casseroles, cards, knitted blankets, anything that might soothe the ragged wound that never scabbed. Some said, quietly, that they'd seen things like this before. These cases never end well. Someone muttered in the grocery line, not realizing Emily was within earshot. She left the cart and walked out. She couldn't bear the sound of certainty in anyone's voice. 3 months passed, then 6, then a year. The posters faded from telephone poles. The swing was eventually taken down, not because they'd given up, but because Emily couldn't stand to see it anymore. She wrapped the ropes around her hands one last time before cutting them herself. She placed the wooden seat in the attic with trembling fingers and then locked the door. That room, Noah's room, remained untouched. His favorite blanket still draped over the crib. The tiny stuffed owl he used to carry everywhere perched on the windowsill, gathering dust in the fading light. The mobile above the crib still turned when the wind crept through the cracks in the old house. And sometimes, in the dead quiet of night, Emily swore she could hear the soft music box tune whispering like a ghost. They never stopped searching. Tips would come in, some well-meaning, others cruel. Sightings in other states. Someone claiming to have seen a child matching Noah's description at a rest stop in Ohio. A boy with golden curls in a mall in Minnesota. Each one opened a tiny window of hope, and every time it slammed shut, it hurt worse. Private investigators were hired and ran through funds too quickly. Psychics mailed letters and sent dreams from the other side. None of it mattered. None of it brought Noah home. By the 2nd year, Emily and Mark had learned how to live with a kind of numbness that made normal life feel like walking through water. Slow, heavy, tiring. They no longer spoke about moving. They stopped talking about if Noah came back and started saying when, as if faith could rewrite fate. But faith wears down under the weight of silence. By the third year, the only people still actively looking were Emily, Mark, and Sheriff Donnelly, an aging man who had taken Noah's case personally, partly because he had a grandson the same age and partly because this town didn't let go of its own. Every so often, Donnelly would stop by the Grant home with a file folder in hand, a tired apology in his eyes. "We're still checking everything," he'd say. "There's always a chance." Emily would thank him, pour him lukewarm coffee, and ask the same question she always asked. "Do you believe he's still out there?" And Donnelly, God bless him, always answered the same, "I do." The town moved on. Life insisted on continuing, even when hearts didn't want to. But in the Grant house, time stayed frozen. The calendar on the fridge remained marked on the week Noah disappeared. The swing was gone, but the echo of it still lived in the walls. And for 8 long years, that echo was all they had. Until the tape recorder arrived. It was a Wednesday when the package arrived, late morning, just as a pale wind began rattling the autumn leaves against the porch steps. Emily heard the soft thump at the door and assumed it was the neighbor's cat again, the one that liked to nap on the welcome mat. She opened it expecting fur and whiskers, but instead found a small, battered box with no return address, just their last name scribbled in thick black marker across the top. Grant. The handwriting was uneven, childlike, but forced like someone mimicking a hand not their own. It was wrapped in brown paper, taped at the seams, damp from the morning fog, and had an unsettling weight in her palm. Light but not hollow. Something about it tugged at the pit of her stomach. She brought it inside and stared at it on the kitchen table for a long time, unsure why she didn't tear it open immediately. There was something about the stillness in the house, the way the refrigerator hum paused just long enough to make the silence ring louder, that made her hesitate. Eventually, she called Mark at work, her voice a notch above a whisper. "A package came," she said. "No address. Just our name." "It's odd." Mark told her not to touch it, to wait until he got home, but her fingers were already moving toward the scissors. "I'll be careful," she said, her voice far away, even to herself. Inside the box was a faded cassette tape. No case, just the plastic body of the thing, its white label smudged, unreadable except for the single word written in small capital letters with blue ink. Noah. Emily's hand began to shake. She hadn't seen a cassette in years, not since high school, and certainly not since Noah was born. She turned the box upside down. No note, no explanation, no sender's name or address. Just that one old tape. Her mind whirled with questions, each one colliding with the next like a train running off its tracks. Was this someone's idea of a cruel joke? Another sick tip from someone desperate for attention? Or worse, was it real? Mark arrived within 20 minutes, face pale, lips tight. He took the tape and turned it over several times in his hand, like it might reveal a clue if he stared long enough. Then he walked to the hall closet and pulled out an old box of college things. After rummaging through cords and dusty photo albums, he found what he was looking for. His father's cassette player, yellowed with age, but still intact. With trembling fingers, he pushed the tape into the slot, pressed down the play button, and they both held their breath as the machine crackled to life. At first, there was only static, harsh and uneven, like waves crashing against a broken shore. Then faintly a voice, a child's voice, tiny, fragile, and unmistakably young. "Mommy, are you there?" Emily gasped and stumbled back against the wall, her eyes wide. Mark froze, hands gripping the table, knuckles white. The voice continued, clearer this time. "It's me. It's Noah. I don't know where I am. I want to come home." Silence. A long, terrifying silence. "I try to be good. I do what he says. But sometimes I forget. Please don't be mad." The tape hissed again. Then the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, approaching. The boy's voice lowered, almost whispering now. "He's coming. I have to hide this. Please find me, Mommy." Then it clicked off. Nothing more. The machine stopped with a soft thunk, and the room fell into a silence, so heavy it felt like drowning. Emily collapsed into the nearest chair, unable to form words. Mark sat beside her, staring at the tape player like it had grown teeth. It was impossible. And yet, it was Noah. They knew that voice. The slight lisp on his S's. The way he said mommy instead of mom. It couldn't be faked. Not with such intimate detail. Not with such trembling fear. The questions came like floodwaters. Who had sent it? Where had it been recorded? And when? Was it recent? Or had it been recorded years ago, only now surfacing? And the worst question of all, was Noah still alive? They played it again, and again. Each time, the same terror lodged deeper into their chests. Emily thought about the way Noah's voice cracked when he said, I try to be good. The way he hesitated before saying, he's coming. There was someone else on that tape, not just Noah. Someone watching. Someone who didn't want him to speak. Mark called Sheriff Donnelly immediately. Within the hour, he was sitting at their kitchen table, glasses fogging up from the heat of his coffee, his weathered hands cupped around the tape like it might shatter. He listened without saying a word, then asked to borrow the player and the tape, promising to run it through the state lab for analysis. But before he left, he looked at them with something Emily hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. Not blind hope, not the kind peddled by well-meaning strangers, but cautious, battle-worn belief. The kind that had waited years in silence for a sign. Now, finally, there was one. The search for Noah wasn't over. It had just begun again. The moment Sheriff Donnelly left with the tape recorder and the precious cassette, Emily and Mark were left alone again with the aching quiet of their home. Only now it was heavier, filled with a strange electricity that made the walls feel closer, the shadows deeper. Their minds raced with questions and memories, and for the first time in years, the past did not feel so distant. It was suddenly present, raw and insistent. 8 years of waiting, wondering, and fading hope surged back like a tidal wave, threatening to drown them in grief and fear all over again. Emily sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching Noah's old blanket tightly in her lap. The faint scent of lavender still clung to the fabric, a small piece of Noah's innocence frozen in time. She traced the threadbare edges with her trembling fingers, as if she could somehow reach through the years and touch the boy who had vanished that bright, ordinary afternoon. The voice on the tape had shaken something loose inside her, a stubborn ember of hope that refused to die. Was Noah still out there? Could it be true? The thought was both terrifying and comforting. If he was alive, where was he? Who had taken him? And most haunting of all, why had he sent that message now? Mark paced back and forth across the kitchen, his jaw clenched, eyes dark with sleepless nights and sleepless years. He had spent hours scrolling through news reports, unsolved cases, and missing children's databases, searching for anything that might connect to Noah's voice or the strange delivery. Every lead was a dead end. Yet this tape was different. It was proof that Noah was alive and that he was reaching out from somewhere. Somewhere hidden, somewhere scared. Mark's fingers itched to do something, anything, to break the silence that had imprisoned their family for so long. Later that day, the phone rang. It was Sheriff Donnelly, his voice calm but serious. The state lab had run forensic tests on the tape, and the results were astounding. The recording was not old, it was recent. The ambient sounds, the slight rustling, and even the subtle shifts in Noah's voice showed it had been captured within the last few months. The tape itself was aged, possibly found in an old cassette player, but the recording inside was current. It was as if Noah's voice had been preserved and sent across time to find them. This revelation shattered the fragile peace Emily and Mark had been clinging to. Sheriff Donnelly also mentioned a new lead, a tip from a truck driver who reported seeing a suspicious van parked near the town's abandoned mill late at night, not long before the tape arrived. The van had no license plate, and the driver noticed a small boy inside, playing with a worn stuffed animal. The description fit Noah perfectly. Donnelly urged the Grants to prepare for the possibility that their son was close, yet still trapped. He promised to mobilize a search team at dawn. That night, Emily sat by the window, staring at the swing's empty spot where it once hung, the porch light casting long shadows on the porch boards. Her mind replayed the boy's voice, the desperate plea. "Please find me, Mommy." It was a call through the darkness, a fragile thread connecting her to Noah's unseen world. Tears streamed down her face, but they were not just tears of sorrow. They were tears of renewed determination. She would not let another day pass without trying to bring him home. Mark joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. The years had carved lines into their faces, but in that moment, their shared grief forged an unbreakable bond. They were partners in hope and pain, bound together by the same silent promise. They would find their son, no matter what it took. As the night deepened, the house no longer felt like a tomb of memories, but the battleground for a second chance. The search for Noah had reopened old wounds, but it had also reopened their hearts to hope, a hope that refused to be extinguished. The next morning, before dawn broke over the sleepy town of Millersville, Emily and Mark met with Sheriff Donnelly and a small team of deputies at the edge of the old mill. The chill in the air bit through their coats, but the cold didn't reach the fire burning inside their hearts. For 8 long years, the abandoned mill had been just a forgotten landmark, a shadow in the background of their lives. Now, it was the epicenter of hope, a place where answers might finally be found. The sheriff briefed them quickly, sharing what little information the tip had provided, describing the suspicious van seen parked there late at night. The image of a frightened boy, clutching a worn stuffed animal, haunted their minds. As the team spread out, Emily's eyes scanned every dark corner, every broken window, and every pile of rusted machinery. Memories of Noah's laughter echoed faintly in her mind, mingling with the harsh reality that time had stolen much from them, but not their love. Mark stayed close, his hand never leaving hers, both of them silently willing their son to appear in the shadows, calling out to them. Hours passed, but the cold and uncertainty didn't weaken their resolve. Instead, it hardened it, transforming their fear into fierce determination. Later that day, they discovered a small, makeshift shelter tucked behind a rusted metal wall near the mill's edge. It looked old, but there were signs of recent use: a frayed blanket, scattered crumbs of food, and faint footprints in the dust. Emily's heart pounded wildly. Could Noah have been here? Was this where he had hidden from whoever held him captive? The shelter was too small for a grown man, perfect for a child. But there was no sign of him now. The deputies photographed the area and collected what evidence they could, promising to continue the search with dogs and drones. Back at home, the tape played over and over in Emily's mind. Noah's voice, fragile yet hopeful, lingered in every corner of the house. She wondered about the he mentioned, the man who frightened him, who made him hide. Who was he? How had he kept Noah silent all these years? And why had the boy finally found the courage to send his voice back to them? The questions were like thorny vines, tangling in her heart and mind. That night, as the town slept, Emily and Mark sat together, poring over old photos of Noah and discussing every detail they could remember about that day, the day he vanished from the front yard swing. Every memory was a thread, a clue to unravel the mystery that had taken their son away. They talked about neighbors who had come and gone, suspicious vehicles seen months before, and strange phone calls they had dismissed. The past was no longer just a memory. It was a puzzle they were determined to solve. Mark suggested they reach out to the community, hoping someone might have seen or heard something that could lead them to Noah. Emily agreed, knowing the power of collective memory, especially in small towns where everyone's story was connected. They decided to hold a town meeting, inviting neighbors, old friends, and anyone willing to share information. It was a bold step, but the only way forward in the long, dark tunnel they had been trapped in for so many years. As the first light of dawn broke over Millersville once again, Emily felt a fragile hope stirring in her chest. The search had begun in earnest, fueled by a mysterious tape and the voice of a boy she had never stopped loving. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but for the first time in 8 years, it felt possible. Noah's voice had crossed the silence. Now, it was their turn to answer. The town hall was packed that evening. Word had spread quickly. Emily and Mark's courage had rekindled the community's attention that had long been lulled into silence by time. Faces from their past surrounded them. Neighbors who once smiled and waved, but now wore the tired expressions of years spent wondering what had happened to little Noah. The room buzzed with quiet conversations, hushed whispers, and the occasional sob. Emily stood at the front, holding Mark's hand tightly, her voice steady as she told the story again. Of the vanished boy, the mysterious tape, and the desperate hope that still burned in their hearts. As she spoke, eyes scanned the room, searching for answers or at least some clue to ease the unbearable uncertainty. Then, an older man raised his hand, a retired truck driver named Carl, the same man who had tipped off the sheriff about the van near the mill. His voice trembled as he shared what he'd seen those months ago. A small boy, scared but not crying, sitting quietly in the back of a white van with no license plate. Carl described the vehicle's faded paint and the patch of missing rusted metal near the door. He said he wished he had stopped, but at the time he had been on a tight schedule and thought it might be nothing. Other voices followed. Neighbors recalling strange noises, a woman mentioning an unfamiliar man seen lurking near the park, an old friend recalling a conversation overheard about someone keeping a secret. Each piece fit together like shards of a shattered mirror, reflecting fragments of a story they all feared to face. Emily's heart ached as she absorbed every detail, but she also felt a surge of gratitude. For the first time in years, the community was no longer silent. They were searching together. After the meeting, the sheriff promised to increase patrols around the mill and nearby areas, and a special task force was formed to follow up on all tips. Emily and Mark, exhausted but hopeful, returned home with a small group of volunteers ready to help. The house felt different now, filled with purpose rather than despair. They pored over old maps and photos, comparing notes and tracking patterns. They planned search routes and set up a schedule, determined to leave no stone unturned. But amid the hope, the shadows of doubt lingered. Who had taken Noah? Was he still being held somewhere, or had he been moved far away? And what kind of man kept a child hidden for so long? These questions haunted every waking moment. At night, Emily found herself listening for Noah's voice, replaying the tape again and again, trying to catch any hidden message, any hint of his location. The recording, so fragile and grainy, was their only lifeline. One evening, Mark discovered a message on their answering machine. An unmarked number had left a quiet, distorted voice. The message was brief but chilling. Stop looking. It was a warning, clear and terrifying. Whoever had taken Noah knew they were close, and they wanted to silence the search. The message ignited a new urgency in Emily and Mark. They could not turn back now. Noah's voice had reached them once. Now it was their duty to find him and bring him home. The past had spoken, and the future depended on their courage. The warning message haunted Emily and Mark's minds like a cold shadow that refused to fade. Stop looking. Those two words were not just a threat. They were a sinister declaration that someone powerful and dangerous was still watching, still controlling the story of their missing son. But giving up was impossible. If anything, the message steeled their resolve. The man who had taken Noah must be found, for their son's sake and for all the years stolen from their family. They needed to know who he was, where he was, and why he had kept Noah hidden in silence. Sheriff Donnelly doubled the efforts to uncover any record of suspicious individuals in the area, focusing on the Old Mill District and surrounding neighborhoods. It wasn't long before an old file surfaced, an incident from years ago involving a man named Harold Benson. Benson was a drifter with a patchy criminal record, mostly petty theft and occasional stalking complaints. Most unsettling, some locals remembered him as a strange loner who once worked near the mill and was rumored to have an unhealthy obsession with children. But Benson had disappeared shortly before Noah's disappearance, leaving no forwarding address or trace. With this lead, Emily and Mark met with Donnelly at the sheriff's office to review what little information existed about Benson. They looked at photos, police reports, and community statements. The more they learned, the more the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Benson's pattern of behavior suggested he might have been the he Noah mentioned on the tape, the man who made their son hide in fear. Yet Benson's current whereabouts were unknown. It was as if he had vanished as completely as their child. Emily's hands trembled as she stared at the grainy photo of Benson. His cold eyes seemed to pierce through time, a reminder of the evil lurking beneath the surface of their peaceful town. Mark placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, silently promising that they would not stop until Benson was found and answers were uncovered. Their determination grew sharper, fueled by the weight of years lost and the fragile hope sparked by Noah's voice. They expanded their search, contacting neighboring counties and states, sending Benson's description far and wide. They spoke with anyone who might have known him, piecing together his movements in the months before and after Noah vanished. But every lead came back cold. Benson had seemingly disappeared into thin air, leaving behind only a trail of unanswered questions and frightened memories. Meanwhile, the tape recorder remained their most precious clue. Emily and Mark listened to Noah's voice over and over, looking for any detail they might have missed. The boys' words were simple but filled with fear and longing. They clung to every syllable, imagining their son's small hands holding that tape recorder, trying desperately to send a message of hope across the distance. The sound of his voice was a lifeline, connecting the past to the present, bridging the gap of years spent in silence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily noticed something on the tape, a faint background noise that hadn't been obvious before. A distant hum, like machinery or an engine, and beneath it, a faint rhythmic tapping. She brought this to Donnelly's attention, and together they theorized that the sounds might be clues to Noah's location, perhaps a factory, a warehouse, or even a hidden workshop near the mill or beyond. It was a slim lead, but it was the first real thread they had to pull since the tape arrived. That night, Emily lay awake, her mind swirling with hope and fear. The pieces were falling into place slowly, but every new discovery brought more questions. The past had never felt so close, so urgent. The man named Harold Benson might hold the answers, but until they found him, Noah's fate remained a mystery. Yet Emily refused to give in to despair. Her son's voice had crossed 8 years of silence for a reason, and she would chase that reason to the ends of the earth. The faint hum and rhythmic tapping that Emily had detected on Noah's tape became an obsession for the entire team. Every night, they replayed the recording, hoping the subtle sounds would lead them to the boys' hiding place. With the sheriff's approval, a small group of volunteers and experts began scouring the abandoned industrial sites on the outskirts of Millersville, where old factories and warehouses lay empty and forgotten. The town held its breath, waiting for any sign that would lift the heavy veil of silence that had hung over Noah's disappearance for so long. One chilly morning, a volunteer named Lisa, an audio specialist who had recently moved to town, made a breakthrough. She isolated the tapping sounds and matched their rhythm to a Morse code pattern. It was a faint, broken message, but the letters spelled out a word: safe. Emily's heart raced at the revelation. Could Noah be trying to tell them that he was or had been safe at some point? Or was it a desperate plea for them to find him before it was too late? Armed with this new clue, the team focused on a dilapidated warehouse near the old mill, a place that still had the faint sounds of machinery in the background when the wind blew just right. They found footprints around the building, fresh in places, as if someone had recently been there. Emily ran her fingers over the cracked walls, imagining Noah's small hands pressed against the cold surface, trying to find a way out or a sign that help was near. The shelter they had found earlier suddenly felt connected to this location. It was a grim and haunting connection, but it was something real. Sheriff Donnelly coordinated a search of the warehouse's interior with a specialized team equipped with thermal cameras and canine units. Every creak of the floor and shadow on the wall sent a jolt of adrenaline through Emily and Mark. Hours turned into a day, and although no child was found, the signs of recent occupation were undeniable. Discarded food wrappers, a small torn blanket, and even some children's drawings taped faintly to a wooden beam. The pieces of a long broken story were beginning to surface, but the heart of it, the missing boy, was still out there, silent but not forgotten. The community rallied around Emily and Mark more than ever. Local businesses donated supplies for the search teams, and volunteers came from neighboring towns. News crews arrived, shining bright lights and cameras on the investigation, sharing Noah's story with the wider world. The renewed attention brought both hope and fear. Hope that Noah could still be found, fear that the danger surrounding his disappearance was far from over. At night, Emily sat beside the tape recorder, clutching the fragile plastic case like a lifeline. Noah's voice, so distant yet so vivid, was the thread that connected them to a reality beyond their grief. She whispered promises she longed to keep, that they would find him, bring him home, and heal the wounds of years lost to silence. Mark, ever steadfast, held her close, their shared grief, now a shared mission. They had crossed the darkest valley together, but now a faint light flickered ahead. Though the warehouse search yielded no direct rescue, the discoveries reignited their belief that Noah's voice was a beacon in the night. Somewhere, hidden in shadows or silence, he was waiting for them to find him, and Emily vowed that she would never stop listening. Days turned into weeks, but the faint hope that had blossomed within Emily and Mark refused to wilt. Each morning, they woke with the same determination, to find their son, to unravel the mystery that had haunted them for 8 years. Then, a breakthrough arrived in the most unexpected form. A local handyman, George, brought to the sheriff's office a small, battered box he had discovered in the woods near the old mill while clearing brush. Inside were old photographs, a broken watch, and a crudely carved wooden whistle. Among the pictures was one that stopped Emily's breath, a faded snapshot of Noah, smiling but much older, sitting beside a man whose face was obscured by shadows. The photo ignited a firestorm of questions and emotions. Could Noah have been alive all these years, kept hidden but safe? Or was this another cruel trick of memory and hope? Emily's hands shook as she clutched the image, tracing the outlines of her son's face. Mark's eyes grew moist with a mixture of pain and renewed hope. The sheriff's team immediately began searching for clues connected to the man in the photo, hoping to uncover who he was and if he could lead them to Noah. Meanwhile, Emily revisited the tape recorder. She noticed a pattern she hadn't seen before, a sequence of numbers embedded faintly beneath Noah's voice. It was a code, a series of coordinates perhaps, or a phone number meant to be discovered. With the help of Lisa, the audio specialist, they decoded the message and found it pointed to an abandoned cabin several miles outside Millersville, hidden deep within a cluster of pine trees. The search party assembled quickly, tension thick in the air. Emily and Mark rode alongside Sheriff Donnelly and several volunteers, their hearts pounding with a mix of dread and hope. The forest was dense and silent, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for the moment when the past would collide with the present. When they finally reached the cabin, it was exactly as described: weathered wood, overgrown ivy, and windows dark with dust. But inside, the signs of recent life were unmistakable: a small bed with crumpled blankets, scattered toys, and scraps of food. Emily's hands trembled as she stepped cautiously through the cabin, eyes searching every corner for the boy who had once swung on the front yard swing. Her breath caught when she found a notebook lying on a rough wooden table. Inside were pages filled with childish handwriting, Noah's handwriting. The journal was filled with drawings of the swing, the house, and strange figures lurking in shadows. But most importantly, it told a story of captivity, hope, and a promise to one day be free. The discovery shattered the silence of the years. Noah had been close, perhaps watched over by someone with complicated motives. The journal described a man who had taken him, but cared for him in his own twisted way, keeping him hidden from the world. Emily's heart broke and soared all at once. Her son was alive, yet so deeply trapped in a world she had never imagined. Mark held her tightly, whispering that this was just the beginning of finding their way back to Noah. The sheriff sealed off the cabin for investigation, promising that no stone would be left unturned. Emily and Mark returned home that night with a notebook clutched tightly, feeling the weight of the next steps pressing on them. The search was no longer just about finding Noah. It was about understanding the man who had stolen him and breaking the chains that had kept them apart for so long. With the discovery of Noah's journal, A grim portrait of the man who had held him captive began to emerge, painting shadows darker than anyone had imagined. Sheriff Donnelly and his team delved deeper into Harold Benson's past, piecing together a history that spanned decades of isolation, obsession, and heartbreak. Benson was not merely a drifter. He was a man fractured by his own torments, a loner whose mind had twisted into a labyrinth of control and fear. Locals recalled Benson's erratic behavior, his sudden disappearances, and whispered rumors of a hidden cabin in the woods, a place where no one dared to go. The journal revealed more than just captivity. It revealed a strange, disturbing bond. Benson had taken Noah, not only to hide him, but out of a warped sense of protection. Pages told of Benson teaching Noah survival skills, but also warning him of the dangers beyond the forest, instilling a mix of fear and loyalty. The boy's words echoed a childhood stolen, but not completely lost. There were moments of tenderness, fleeting glimpses of a connection twisted by circumstances, but real nonetheless. Emily read the journal with a conflicted heart, torn between rage and sorrow. How could someone cause such pain and yet care in the same breath? Mark stood silently beside her, sharing the weight of this terrible knowledge. They vowed to understand Benson's mind fully, to bring justice not only for Noah, but for the truth that had been buried for 8 long years. Meanwhile, the sheriff's department tracked down every clue tied to Benson's movements after Noah's disappearance. They found evidence that Benson had crossed state lines, moving stealthily between abandoned places, always one step ahead of the law. Despite this, nothing concrete tied him to Noah's final whereabouts, until a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A woman named Martha, who had worked with Benson years ago at a rural maintenance company, came forward. She described Benson as a man tormented by his past, but strangely protective of children he encountered. Martha recalled Benson mentioning a son he had taken in, though she dismissed it at the time as a delusion. Now, hearing Noah's story, she agreed to help search for Benson's hideouts. Her testimony provided new leads into remote cabins and forgotten trails through the dense woods surrounding Millersville. Emily and Mark met Martha in a quiet cafe, grateful for the connection to Benson's past. Martha spoke with a mixture of pity and fear, revealing that Benson had lost his own family many years earlier, a tragedy that fractured his mind and drove him into hiding. Her words added layers to the mystery. Benson's actions were born from pain, but they had stolen years from an innocent boy. Emily felt a fierce determination settle in her chest. They had to find Benson alive or dead. It was the only way to bring Noah back fully. As the investigation intensified, the community's support remained unwavering. Volunteers combed through the woods, and search parties grew larger. Every small clue, every whisper, brought the hope of reunion closer. Emily and Mark clung to the fragile thread of hope woven through Noah's journal, ready to face the darkness behind the shadows to reclaim their son's life. One crisp autumn evening, as Emily sat alone in the quiet of her living room, the old tape recorder clicked to life unexpectedly. The soft crackle of static filled the room, followed by the unmistakable sound of a child's voice, clear, trembling, and achingly familiar. "Mommy," the single word sent a shock wave through her, a tidal wave of relief and pain crashing together in her chest. She dropped the recorder, hands trembling as tears streamed down her face. After 8 years of silence, Noah had spoken to her again, not just in memories or faded photographs, but a voice that transcended time. Mark rushed home when Emily called, hearing the story through the crackling speaker. Together, they listened in stunned silence as Noah's voice grew stronger, telling a fragmented story of fear, hope, and a promise to come home one day. The tape had recorded more than just sounds. It held his spirit, his desperate plea, and a map of his heart. The voice was raw with emotion, fragile yet defiant. For Emily and Mark, it was as if Noah had reached through the years to hold their hands once more. The sheriff's department, alerted immediately, seized the tape and began forensic audio analysis, determined to extract every detail. Experts worked tirelessly, enhancing the voice and filtering background noises. They identified a faint melody beneath Noah's words, a lullaby his mother used to sing, confirming the recording was made close to where the family once lived. This discovery reignited the investigation, focusing efforts on the areas around Millersville once again. Community members gathered in support, sharing stories of hope and resilience. Local churches organized vigils, while news outlets broadcast the extraordinary event. The world seemed to hold its breath, united by the voice of a boy lost but not forgotten. Emily and Mark became symbols of unwavering faith, their journey inspiring others to never give up on those they love. But amidst the joy, a shadow loomed. The renewed attention stirred those who wished the past to remain buried. Threatening letters arrived, warning the family to stop digging. Yet, these dark messages only strengthened their resolve. Emily vowed that no fear would silence Noah's voice again. They would fight not only for his return, but to bring those responsible to justice. As days passed, clues embedded in Noah's voice led the team closer to a network of hidden shelters scattered through the forest. The sheriff's search expanded, using infrared drones and trained dogs, mapping every corner of the dense woods. Emily joined the search parties, her determination unyielding, fueled by the sound of her son's voice echoing in her heart. One night, as the team combed a remote clearing, a sudden cry pierced the air, a child's cry. Hearts raced. Could it be Noah? The moment was brief, a single note lost in the vast wilderness, but it sparked hope that no technology could match. The long wait had brought them to the brink of a miracle, and Emily whispered a prayer that soon her son would be safely in her arms again. The weeks following the discovery of Noah's voice on the tape recorder were filled with a tense, restless energy that rippled through the town of Millersville and beyond. Emily and Mark found themselves drawn deeper into the search, driven by a mix of hope and exhaustion that only parents who have lost a child could truly understand. Every day brought new leads, fresh investigations, and countless unanswered questions. Yet the breakthrough they desperately needed was still out of reach, until one late afternoon, when fate intervened in the most unexpected way. Emily had gone to the local market, still carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, but determined to maintain some semblance of normal life. As she reached for a loaf of bread, a man approached her cautiously, his eyes betraying a mix of fear and urgency. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked quietly. "My name is James. I think I know where your son is." The simple words sent a shiver down her spine. She gripped the shopping cart, her heart pounding as she struggled to steady her voice. "Please, tell me everything," she whispered. James explained that he had once worked as a forest ranger and had noticed unusual activity in a secluded part of the woods, not far from the cabin the sheriff's team had investigated. He had seen a man, solitary and secretive, moving supplies and watching the area like a hawk. James believed this man might be connected to Noah's disappearance. With this new lead, the sheriff's department quickly organized a small, discreet team to investigate the area under James's guidance. As Emily followed the searchers from a distance, her thoughts raced with memories and fears. Could this finally be the end of their long nightmare? Or was it another cruel twist? The forest was dense and unforgiving, but James's knowledge proved invaluable. Days of careful searching uncovered a hidden shelter, partially camouflaged by branches and earth. Inside, the faint scent of recent habitation lingered, along with signs that someone had been living there quietly. An old blanket, empty cans, and scraps of food. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. Emily and Mark were summoned to the site, their hearts heavy yet hopeful as they stepped cautiously into the shadowed refuge. The shelter's walls bore marks and carvings, some resembling the drawings found in Noah's journal. It was a silent testament to the years lost, the boy's struggle, and the twisted bond between him and his captor. But the most astonishing moment came when Emily noticed a small, worn photograph pinned to the wall. A picture of Noah, smiling but older, standing beside a man whose face was now familiar from the earlier photograph. Tears blurred her vision as the full weight of the connection settled upon her. This was not just a place of captivity, but a chapter in Noah's story, a piece of the puzzle that would bring them closer to the truth. Determined more than ever, Emily and Mark prepared to confront the past and the man who had shaped it. The shelter was not just a hideout. It was a key to understanding, a beacon of hope that Noah's long journey was nearing its end. As night fell over the woods, Emily whispered a prayer, promising that no shadow would ever again hide her son from the light of home. The discovery of the hidden shelter was more than a breakthrough. It was a turning point that shook the very foundation of Emily and Mark's world. As the search team scoured the area, Emily's mind drifted back to that fateful day when Noah vanished from their front yard swing. The memories were sharp, raw, and haunted by the silence that followed. Yet now, with tangible proof of where he had been kept, a fierce determination burned inside her to finally bring closure to years of unanswered questions. Mark, too, wrestled with a maelstrom of emotions: relief, guilt, and a quiet fury aimed at the man who had stolen their son's childhood. Sheriff Donnelly approached with solemn news. They had traced Harold Benson's recent movements to a nearby town, suggesting he might still be alive and somewhere not far away. The realization that Benson had evaded capture for so long sparked a desire for justice that went beyond finding Noah. It was about confronting the man responsible for years of torment and stolen innocence. The town buzzed with a mix of hope and apprehension. Many wondered if Benson's shadow would finally be lifted or if darker truths would emerge. Emily found herself torn between the urge to forgive and the need for retribution. She remembered Benson's fractured mind, the glimpses of humanity in Noah's journal, and the pain that had shaped the man's actions. Yet nothing could excuse the years her son had lost. Mark stood by her side, a steady pillar in the storm, sharing her pain, but reminding her that their focus must remain on Noah's recovery and safety. As the investigation intensified, Emily spent long nights poring over every detail in Noah's journal, searching for clues that might lead them to Benson. She discovered subtle hints of the man's regrets and fears, entries that spoke of loneliness and a desperate hope that Noah would one day find his way home. These revelations added complexity to a story once viewed in black and white, revealing the tangled emotions that had bound captor and captive alike. Meanwhile, the search for Benson became a race against time. The sheriff's department coordinated with neighboring counties and federal agencies, sharing intelligence and following leads that grew colder by the day. Yet Emily refused to lose hope. She held on to the belief that her son's voice, heard on that old tape recorder, was a beacon that would guide them through the darkness. One afternoon, a breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A local mechanic recognized Benson's vehicle abandoned near an old logging road. The discovery sparked a coordinated manhunt, with deputies and volunteers combing the area for any sign of the elusive man. Emily and Mark joined the effort, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. As dusk settled over the forest, the searchers found a worn path leading deeper into the woods. Following it carefully, they came upon a clearing where Benson had clearly taken refuge. The sight was both chilling and heartbreaking, a small campsite littered with belongings, but no sign of Benson or Noah. Among the scattered items, however, lay a battered cassette tape recorder, the same model as the one that had captured Noah's voice years before. Emily picked it up with trembling hands, her heart heavy yet hopeful. This was the tangible link to the past, a silent witness to the years of separation and survival. She knew that the end of this journey was near, and that soon, the answers they had long sought would finally come to light. Together, Emily and Mark stood in the fading light, ready to face whatever truths lay ahead, bound by love and the unbreakable hope that had carried them through 8 long years. The air was thick with anticipation as the search team closed in on the clearing where Benson's campsite had been found. Emily and Mark stood side by side, hearts pounding, the weight of 8 long years pressing down on their shoulders. The battered cassette tape recorder in Emily's hands felt like a fragile thread connecting the past to the present, a testament to Noah's enduring spirit and the unimaginable journey he had endured. Though Benson was nowhere to be seen, the discovery reignited a fierce hope that their son was still alive, somewhere, waiting to come home. As night fell over the dense forest, a call crackled over the radio. A young boy had been spotted near a distant cabin, confused and disoriented, but alive. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Mark gripped her hand tightly, and the team moved swiftly, the flicker of a flashlight piercing the darkness like a beacon of hope. Moments later, Noah appeared from the shadows, older now, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and recognition. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she knelt and embraced him, the years of pain dissolving in a single, shattering moment. Noah's voice, once only heard faintly on a tape, now spoke clearly, telling a story of survival, resilience, and longing. The reunion was bittersweet. Noah's recovery would be slow and complicated as he grappled with the lost years and the trauma inflicted by Benson. But Emily and Mark were determined to give him the love and support he needed to heal. The small community of Millersville rallied around the family, their shared relief and joy palpable as the boy who had vanished so long ago returned home. Therapists, friends, and neighbors all played a part in the difficult but hopeful journey ahead. In the quiet moments that followed, Emily reflected on the fragile beauty of life, the twists of fate, the enduring bonds of family, and the power of hope that had carried them through the darkest days. Noah's story was one of heartbreak and healing, a reminder that even when the world seems lost, the human spirit can endure and triumph. The old tape recorder, now carefully stored in a box of memories, symbolized a bridge between what had been and what could still be. Mark stood nearby, watching his son with a mixture of pride and sorrow. The scars left by the years of separation would never fully fade, but the love that bound them was stronger than any pain. Together, they would rebuild their lives, piece by piece, finding strength in each other and the community that refused to give up. Noah's voice, once a distant echo, was now a song of hope, resilience, and new beginnings. As the sun rose over Millersville, casting warm light across the familiar streets and homes, Emily whispered a silent vow to never take a moment for granted, to cherish every smile, every word, ever. Why embrace? The journey had been long and fraught with pain, but it had led them home. And in that home, surrounded by love and healing, they found a peace that had once seemed impossible, a peace born from the enduring power of hope, family, and the unbreakable bonds of the heart. Thank you so much for joining me on this emotional journey, a story of loss, hope, and the incredible power of family. I hope Noah's story touched your heart as deeply as it touched mine. If you found meaning in this tale, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories that move and inspire. I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, feelings, or even your own stories. Your voice matters, and together, we create a community where every story counts. Until next time, take care of yourself and those you love.